Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of our series, which I forgot to mention the title of the series. The title of the series is The Road to Revolution, Monarchy, Power, and Debt. So, where were we last time? The king does not pay, but he collects taxes nearly double. Almost every year, says Saint-Simon. The king drained the blood of all of his subjects, squeezing them until the pus came out, enriching an endless army of tax contractors and officials who kept most of the revenue for themselves. It's a pretty gnarly depiction of taxes, but it looks like Saint-Simon made a clear point. Today we often think of the problem of the modern state is having too many government workers, too much bureaucracy, and of course too much government, as is currently happening to us here in the United States. But in the 18th century France, the situation was the opposite. There was very little bureaucracy. The state didn't have the employees to collect taxes directly. The collection of taxes and duties was outsourced to private contractors, financiers, who would advance money to the king and then handle the task of collecting taxes, duty, and tithes. Now, this word tithes, it's spelled Tithes. Tithes were a form of tax or compulsory payments, traditionally amounting to 1/10 of a person's income, and based on agricultural produce, and they were given to support the church. They were collected by the Catholic Church from peasants and landowners, often causing resentment. While originally intended to fund religious activities and aid the poor, much of the revenue ended up enriching the upper clergy, making tithes a source of popular discontent. The tax system was so complex that it was nearly impossible to understand. But the contractors, of course, knew how to navigate it. Once the financiers had paid the king the required amount, they kept the rest, hiring an army of tax collectors who weren't public servants but were employed as contractors. Over time, these financiers formed a large consortium called the Firme Générale, a group of bankers who operating with their own systems and no oversight, collected taxes across the entire kingdom. Saint-Simon doesn't hold back. The king raises taxes, but with the help of the contractors. By this point, the finance minister, Desmarets, realized change was necessary and proposed a reform. What he suggested might sound familiar. A wealth tax. At the time, there was no real wealth tax in France. Most revenue came from duties, taxes on trade, and goods. Every purchase on sale contributed to a portion to the treasury. There were some taxes on wealth, but they were applied inconsistently because local officials would say, you pay this much, well, you pay this much. It was very preferential and up in the air. And the officials allocated the burden as they saw fit. So one person paid one amount, one person paid a different amount. No one was required to file a declaration of income of assets. It was a chaotic system, and Desmarets' proposal sought to bring some order. The wealth tax was designed to replace or supplement other forms of taxation like the taille, a direct tax on land. It aimed to tax individuals based on the value of their property or wealth, targeting the wealthier classes more directly. This shift would have relieved the peasants and lower classes who were already weighted down by other taxes. For example, there was another tax called the gabelle. There was a tax on salt in which some regions would pay a lot more and it was a compulsory also too. You had to buy salt and pay that much, while others would pay less. And here there is a catch. There wasn't a wealth tax truly proportional to one's riches. The wealth tax proposed by the minister was an idea that had been anticipated before, but back then, well-meaning financiers had suggested, instead of this complex web of taxes and duties, let's abolish it all and implement a flat tax. Well, of course, they didn't call it a flat tax because at the time Europe spoke French, not English. Instead, they said, let's create a single tax, just one on wealth. Let's implement a single tax on wealth. It was a well-intentioned idea, but naturally the tax contractors weren't pleased, and the entire world of finance and banking rose in opposition, and the proposal was never passed. Well, you might think there was a dichotomy between who paid taxes. The nobles did not pay taxes because originally there was this idea during the medieval times where the nobles were called by the king to fight and to provide an army, therefore they were not taxed. So all the tax was taken from the lower classes. And this idea perpetuated through the centuries, but at this point it was just a nominal thing. It was not really applied anymore, in the sense that the nobles didn't really have to go and fight or provide an army any longer. Now, in the chaotic final years of the son's king reign, Louis XIV, Minister Desmarets took steps forward with a bold proposal to introduce the wealth tax. But this time, instead of abolishing all the other taxes, like it was suggested previously, he added it on top of the existing ones. And here we see how decision-making unfolds in an absolute monarchy. As I've mentioned, the king can do as he pleases. But of course, the king doesn't know everything. He relies on a network of collaborators and advisors for financial matters. There is the Council of Finances, led by the Minister of Finance, who brings proposals to the king. The king has the final say, but technical experts play a crucial role. So Minister Desmarets, with his brilliant idea of introducing the wealth tax, knows he must first have it studied by a commission. This way, he can approach the king and say, I have a project that's been approved by the experts and the technicians. To make this happen, the Minister of Finance appoints a commission of technicians to review the projects. Well, who do you think he's going to place in this commission? Well, he places his brother, his son-in-law, and his two brothers-in-law on the commission. Unsurprisingly, the commission approves the project, and with this in his hands, the minister goes to the king and declares, here's the project for a new tax reform approved by the finest experts in the kingdom. At this point, Saint-Simon raises an intriguing objection, recounted in his memoirs. It's fascinating because it reveals a mindset very different from ours. People then were used to endless taxes, squeezed dry, so much that, as Saint-Simon says, not only blood, but even pus comes out. So it's really something that used to really drain people financially. Yet until then, no one had to reveal their wealth. This was the most scary thing. At most, estimates were used. This new tax, however, requires an assessment and mandates everyone declare their wealth. To us, this seems normal, but to Saint-Simon, it was unimaginable, a nightmare. He says, do you understand? He asks. This will uncover family secrets, things carefully hidden. It will spark furious quarrels between husbands and wives, between siblings. It will air private matters, ruin credit, because who will get credit once their true wealth is known? Saint-Simon tells us that even the king was frightened by the proposal, despite being accustomed to imposing the most enormous taxes. But he could not avoid being unsettled by this new project. In fact, even his servants noticed that something was troubling the king. He was unusually concerned, finding the idea of forcing his subjects to such a tax to be so terrifying. In his distress, the king turned to his confessor, Father Letellier, a Jesuit. Father Letellier, an experienced and cunning figure, assured the king, I will have the matter examined. A few days later, Father Letellier returned with a written opinion from the theologians of the Sorbonne, the highest theological authority in the kingdom. These theologians declared that, in reality, all the property of the king's subjects belonged to the king. Therefore, when the king took it, he was merely reclaiming what was rightfully his, and he should not have any scruples of conscience about it. At that moment, everyone could see that the king was once again calm and in good spirit. Saint-Simon is horrified, just imagine. You see what happens when the king is left in the hands of such a confessor, someone who speaks only to him, and what becomes of a state left in such hands. The king, in the opinion of the Sorbonne, no longer doubted that all the property of his subjects was his, and that whatever he did not take, leaving it behind, was granted to them purely out of grace. At this point, we're truly witnessing the peak of absolute monarchy. The king not only is empowered to make any decision, but he believes that everything belongs to him. Yet despite this belief, the process still required the approval from the Council of Finances. This council, made up of ministers, princes, advisors, and was presided over by the finance minister and convened in the presence of the king. At court, the atmosphere is thick with anticipation. Everyone knows that a new project is in the works, but no one dares to read it themselves. Fear lingers in the air, as no one wants to risk opposing the king's will. The day finally arrives where the Council of Finances convenes. The minister walks in with the project in his bag, but before he can even take it out, the king steps forward addressing the council. You all know that we're facing a difficult time. The problems we face are vast, and the need for solution is urgent. The minister has prepared a proposal to find new resources, and I, the king, have read it, and I must say that is excellent, and I am certain that once you hear it, you will all agree with me. The room falls silent. The weight of the king's words hang in the air. The council members, uneasy, now feel the pressure mounting. They haven't seen the project, but the king has spoken, and his word is law. The fate of the proposal is sealed before anyone has ever had the chance to discuss it. The minister starts his impassioned speech. He explained how the war and the enemy's refusal to make peace had brought France to the brink of disaster. The kingdom was on the verge of invasion, and extreme measures were now unavoidable. But with the introduction of this new tax, all will be well, and the king will be able to settle the debts, pay the salaries, and most importantly, money will begin to circulate again, and everyone in turn would grow wealthier. The minister pulled out the lengthy edict and began reading it aloud. He read it all from beginning to end, and when he finished, the room fell silent. No one spoke. The king, sensing the tension, turned to the oldest advisor in the room. "What do you think?" he asked, seeking for an opinion. The advisor, an elderly man, hesitated. "Your Majesty," he began, "to truly offer a fair opinion, I will need to read the document in peace, perhaps take it home and study it properly. I cannot give a response in good conscience. I will request the grace to abstain from voting." The king nodded in understanding. "Of course," he said, "you're right. There is no point in asking for a hasty opinion. The minister has studied this project thoroughly, and nothing better could come from it. So I ask you all, do you approve?" Imagine the tension. Saint-Simon tells us, and so this bloody affair was concluded, sealed, registered, and published with muffled sobs and widespread lamentation. The result was nothing like what the commission of so-called cannibals had imagined. The king didn't pay a single extra coin beyond what he had before, because it was even more tight. Instead, everyone was squeezed once again, with only the financiers escaping, for it was impossible to know what they truly had in their vaults. This was the state of affairs when, in 715, the Sun Kings passed away, and the heir to the throne was a child, none other than the future Louis XV. the great-grandson of Louis XIV. The Sun King had lived a long life, outlasting both his son and his grandson. Now, the heir was his great-grandson, a mere child. As a result, France entered a period of regency, which would last for 8 years from 715 to 1723. So we enter into a regency, and next time we'll find out who the regent actually is and what are his vices and his propensities, because he will be in control of the reign in attendance that this little kid will grow up, and he will be able to take the crown and assume power from then on. Well, we will find out next time. You'll be surprised how incredibly what kind of vices, what kind of behaviors, even back then, people could fall under, like even especially the nobility, because of course with power comes responsibility, and of course there comes some pleasures and some other frivolities that come around, because they are allowed to splurge, to enjoy life in a different way, farther from what is the life of a commoner, a peasant, a poor person. But we'll find out about this next time. Well, thank you very much for following up this far. Next time on episode 3, we'll find out everything there is to know about the regent. Thank you. Bye.